Namaste, and welcome to the UPSC News Analysis for the 25th of April, 2025. Today, in this deep dive, we're unpacking the day's most important happenings, making sense of complex ideas, and drawing clear lines to what matters for your UPSC mains exams.
Exactly.
We've got a range of sources with us, giving us different angles on everything from diplomatic challenges in our neighborhood to big shifts on the world stage.
Velcool. And our aim isn't just to tell you the what, but the why and the so what for you, the UPSC aspirant. We need to break down the basic concepts and give you that analytical lens.
Right. So, what's on the agenda today? Looks like a packed list.
It is. We'll be looking at the India-Maldives situation, which seems to be escalating. Then there's a first-of-its-kind naval exercise involving India, France, and the UAE.
Interesting.
Also, Singapore's unusual move against cancel culture.
Yes, that caught my eye.
Then China's growing defense exports, particularly advanced aircraft.
Implications there.
The UK's decision on security equipment for Sri Lanka. Positive news, surprisingly, from the Amazon rainforest.
Good to hear some positive environmental news.
A teacher protection law in South Korea. The latest U.S. aid package for Ukraine. Iran seizing a vessel near Hormuz. And finally, Russia's gas deal with Uzbekistan via Kazakhstan.
Okay, quite a global tour. Let's start closer to home then, with India and the Maldives. Things seem pretty serious. India's issued a warning.
Yes, the diplomatic row, basically a significant formal disagreement, has definitely intensified. You know, the High Commission, India's main diplomatic mission there, is usually central to our strategic partnership.
That partnership covering defense, trade, the usual things.
Exactly. But that's under strain. It seems due to, well, perceived anti-India remarks from Maldivian leaders. And maybe more importantly, India's growing unease about China's footprint in the Maldives. It's classic geopolitics, really.
But haven't we generally had good relations? India's the first responder, development partner.
Historically, yes. We've always been there. Operation Cactus back in '88 is a key example. And our maritime surveillance cooperation is ongoing. The Maldives is absolutely central to our neighborhood first policy and stagger security and growth for all in the region.
Plus, its location is critical, right? Near Lakshadweep, on those major sea lanes.
Precisely. But, you know, these tensions aren't entirely new. They often surface when Maldivian governments appear to lean more towards China. And this time it feels like social media and certain political narratives might be fanning the flames.
Okay, so for the main's perspective, this is clearly more than just a temporary tiff. What are the deeper currents here?
Absolutely. Beyond the strong historical and cultural links, there's this growing competition for influence in the Indian Ocean. China's Belt and Road Initiative and its investments in the Maldives is a huge factor.
Right.
We're seeing what looks like rising anti-India sentiment, maybe used politically within the Maldives. Some Indian projects are facing pushback, and, you know, Maldivian internal politics can really swing their foreign policy alignment.
And who are the key players we need to consider?
Well, obviously, India's Ministry of External Affairs, the Maldivian government itself, but also the local populations in both countries and regional actors like Sri Lanka and the UAE, they have stakes in regional stability too.
So what are the potential consequences if this row keeps escalating?
They could be quite serious. It threatens our maritime security setup in the IOR, regional cooperation, maybe even within SAARC, the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, could suffer.
Could it get to economic measures? Visa issues?
It's possible that would directly hit our people-to-people ties, which we've worked hard to build.
So, the way forward. What can be done?
Careful diplomacy is paramount. Back-channel talks are often crucial in these situations. Track 2 initiatives, those informal dialogues with academics, civil society, can also help bridge gaps.
And continuing development work.
Yes, but focusing on projects that clearly benefit the Maldivian people to build goodwill and counter any narrative of purely strategic motives. And, of course, strategically monitoring and balancing China's influence. It's a delicate act.
And just to remind listeners, this connects directly to prelims topics like IR, Indian Ocean Strategy, SAGAR.
And for mains, GS Paper 2, specifically India and its neighborhood, and broader international relations.
Okay, thinking about China's role. How can India better use its soft power, its cultural links, to build resilience there? Something to ponder. Right, let's shift gears to something more cooperative. That first ever trilateral naval exercise between India, France, and the UAE. Sounds significant.
It is indeed. A trilateral exercise, simply put, involves 3 nations practicing together. Here, it's naval. The goal is improving interoperability, making sure different navies can work together effectively.
Testing coordination, readiness.
Exactly. This specific exercise aims to boost maritime security. enhance joint capabilities, and promote peace in the Indian Ocean region. It really underscores India's deepening strategic relationships with both France and the UAE.
And those partnerships are important. Why specifically France and the UAE, thinking from a prelims angle?
Well, India and France have had a strategic partnership since 1998. It's broad, covering joint exercises like Maruna for Navy, Garuda for Air Force, Shakti for Army, plus cooperation in space, nuclear energy, and the Indo-Pacific generally. France is a key Indo-Pacific player.
And the UAE.
A major trade partner, huge Indian diaspora. There are over 3 million people. We do joint exercises like Desert Flag and Zayed Talwar and cooperate closely on energy security and investments, vital partner in the Gulf.
So this trilateral, it's about freedom of navigation, countering China's presence.
Yes, ensuring full-on in the IOR, pushing back against rising assertiveness, and strengthening that sort of QAD plus framework. It also aligns with India's Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative. And remember, France and the UAE have their own territories and interests in the Indian Ocean, too.
Okay, for mains then, what's the bigger strategic picture? Why is this exercise particularly noteworthy now?
The IOR is just fundamentally crucial. Over 80% of global oil trade passes through it. Security there is paramount. And as we discussed with the Maldives, China's growing influence ports infrastructure is prompting like-minded democracies to cooperate more closely.
And France and the UAE are natural partners in that context.
They really are. France has territory and a naval presence. The UAE is a key maritime hub. Shared challenges like piracy, terrorism, illegal fishing also drive this cooperation. The need for information sharing, logistics support, coordinated patrols is critical.
So strategically, this boosts India's role.
Definitely. It enhances our defense diplomacy, positions India as a net security provider in the region.
Right.
It builds trust with key partners and reinforces a rules-based maritime order.
Key stakeholders being the defense and external affairs ministries, the navies involved.
And specifically India's Western Naval Command, given the geography.
Beyond the security side, does this signal maybe a shift towards a more multipolar security setup in the Indian Ocean? Another thought for our listener.
It could be interpreted that way, yes.
So what's next for this trilateral cooperation?
Ideally, it becomes institutionalized, maybe an annual dialogue or exercise.
Could it expand? Include other countries?
Potentially, yes. Including other like-minded nations could strengthen it further. Developing better shared maritime domain awareness, integrating disaster response efforts, maybe even joint tech development. These are logical next steps.
Okay, so relevancy and prelims, defense exercises, India-France, India-UAE relations, Indo-Pacific, mains, GS Paper 2 IR, GS Paper 3 security and strategy.
Precisely.
All right, let's pivot to a very different kind of issue. Singapore's proposed bill against cancel culture. What's this about?
It's a fascinating move. Cancel culture basically refers to that phenomenon, often online, where someone faces widespread condemnation or boycott for perceived offensive actions or statements.
And the bill aims to counter this.
Yes, Singapore's Ministry of Law framed it as protecting citizens from social media mob justice and ensuring fairer expression. It seems linked to a rise in cases of online harassment, people losing jobs or facing intense public shaming.
But how does this fit with freedom of speech? That's always the tricky balance, isn't it?
Absolutely. Freedom of speech is that fundamental right, but it usually has limits: defamation, public order, incitement, etc. Online harassment is using digital means to threaten or degrade someone. Defamation is spreading falsehoods that harm reputation.
While stopping harassment is vital, is there a risk this Singapore bill could suppress legitimate criticism, maybe even of the government?
That's the core concern critics often raise with such legislation. Finding that balance is incredibly difficult.
How does this relate globally? Are other countries grappling with this, thinking prelims here?
Yes, Singapore is known for its regulated legal system, often prioritizing social harmony. Globally, many governments are trying to figure out how to regulate online behavior. The UK, Australia, India, we've all seen laws tackling trolling, fake news, cyberbullying.
And in India, we have Article 19(1) for free speech.
But with the reasonable restrictions under 19.2, covering defamation, public order, and so on, relevant laws include the IT Act 2000, IPC sections on defamation. We should also remember Section 66A of the IT Act, which the Supreme Court struck down.
And concepts like safe harbor for platforms.
Yes, Section 79 of the IT Act, which generally protects platforms from liability for user content. And our new Digital Personal Data Protection Act also touches on online harms.
Okay, for mains then. Is cancel culture just a negative thing, or does it have roots in, say, digital accountability?
That's the complex part. It did emerge partly as a tool for digital accountability, calling out things like racism, sexism, abuse. But the concern is it can spiral into, well, disproportionate consequences, mental health issues, job losses, reputational ruin, often without due process or fair hearing.
So the core conflict is free speech versus dignity and privacy.
Largely, yes. And the risk of online vigilantism replacing established legal processes, plus the lack of clear legal safeguards against digital reputation damage.
Ethically, it's tough. Balancing public opinion with individual rights,
Yeah.
the chance for rehabilitation.
Exactly. And for India, Singapore's move might fuel our own debates on digital accountability. Where do we draw the line between legitimate criticism and mob justice online? It's a hard question.
So what's a constructive path forward?
Well, governments need that careful balancing act between digital rights and responsibility. Education on digital ethics is crucial. Stronger grievance redressal mechanisms for victims of online abuse are needed.
And platform responsibility.
Yes, encouraging platforms to manage content more effectively, perhaps through clearer rules. Ultimately, fostering more civil online dialogue is key.
Okay. Prelims relevance.
Yeah.
IT laws, free speech, digital regulation.
Yeah.
Mains. GS Paper 2, governance, constitution, social justice.
You're right.
Now, shifting to defense and geopolitics, China is apparently producing advanced combat aircraft specifically for export.
Yes, that's a significant development. We're talking about combat aircraft, military planes for fighting, attack, reconnaissance. And export-oriented production means they're building these specifically to sell abroad.
Featuring things like stealth technology, making them hard to detect by radar.
Potentially, yes. And moving towards fifth-generation capabilities, stealth, supersonic cruise without afterburners, advanced electronics, networked data. China's clear aim is to expand its military export footprint and compete directly with the U.S. and Russia in this high-end market.
Potential buyers. Developing nations.
Likely candidates in Asia, Africa, Latin America, yeah.
Okay, prelims context. Where does China stand now in arms exports, and how does India compare?
China's already a major player. Key customers include Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nigeria, Myanmar. They export things like the JF-17 fighter jet, co-developed with Pakistan, their CH-series drones, Type 054A frigates.
And rankings.
According to CPRE data for 2024, China was the fourth largest global arms exporter, behind the U.S., Russia, and France. India, on the other hand, has historically been a large importer, but now the big push is Atmanirbhar Bharat self-reliance.
With projects like the Tejas fighter.
Exactly, developed by HAL. And the big future project is the AMCA, the Advanced Medium Combat Aircraft, our own fifth-gen fighter being developed by DRDO and HAL. It's also useful to recall concepts like China's ambition for a blue water navy and the PLA Air Force's modernization alongside this.
So for mains, what are the big concerns for India and globally about these advanced Chinese exports?
China's becoming a major competitor very quickly. Their pricing and sometimes political alignment makes them attractive to developing nations. For India, the concerns are obvious. Potential strategic encirclement if neighbors like Pakistan get these advanced systems.
Risk of technology proliferation, too.
Yes, if the tech falls into the wrong hands. And generally, it could fuel regional militarization, destabilizing the neighborhood.
And global.
Potential for arms races in unstable regions, increased Chinese political leverage through arms sales, and a challenge to the existing U.S.-led security order. Technologically, there are concerns about reverse engineering and integrating AI, raising all sorts of ethical and military questions.
So India's strategic response, what should it be?
We need to accelerate our own programs, especially AMCA. That's critical. We also need to strengthen our own defense export diplomacy, offering credible alternatives.
Collaboration with allies.
Essential. Working with partners like France, the U.S., Russia, Israel for critical technology transfers, and fundamentally enhancing our own surveillance capabilities and air superiority, particularly along our borders and in the IOR.
Got it. Prelims, defense, India-China relations, military tech mains, GS Paper 2 IR, GS Paper 3 security and defense.
Spot on.
Okay, next up. The UK banning security equipment exports to Sri Lanka due to human rights concerns. What's the story here?
Right. This falls under arms export controls, the rules nations have for selling weapons and related gear. The UK cited human rights violations, actions by authorities against basic rights as the reason. Things like police brutality, suppressing dissent, military misusing surveillance tech.
So it's a form of sanction, an export ban.
Essentially, yes. A specific restriction on selling certain goods, driven by the UK's stated foreign policy goal of promoting human rights globally.
Prelims context. What are the UK's policy in Sri Lanka's situation?
The UK has specific criteria under its Export Control Order. Things like human rights, regional stability, risk of internal repression are assessed before licenses are granted. Sri Lanka's human rights record has faced international scrutiny for years, especially related to the end of the civil war in 2009. There are UNHRC resolutions calling for accountability. Ongoing concerns often involve military presence in Tamil areas, press freedom, protest rights.
And India's angle.
It's always relevant for us. Our ethnic ties with Sri Lankan Tamils, the need to monitor rights and geopolitics in our neighborhood first policy. It all connects. And quick reminder for listeners on regional groups, BIMSTEC, the Bay of Bengal Initiative, is another key one alongside SARC.
Okay, mains analysis. What are the wider implications of this UK ban?
Well, it's a common diplomatic tool for Western nations to signal disapproval on human rights. The UK has historical ties via the Commonwealth. Adding context, it will likely strain UK-Sri Lanka relations.
Could it push Sri Lanka towards other suppliers? China? Russia?
That's a distinct possibility, which could damage on human rights, but it also raises questions about consistency. Do they apply the same standards to all allies?
And for India, it's that balancing act again.
Yes. Balancing concerns for Tamil sentiments here with our broader strategic interests in Sri Lanka and the IOR.
What's a constructive way forward then?
Encouraging independent investigations within Sri Lanka is key, perhaps via regional bodies like SARC or BIMSTEC. The UK could focus on rights-based development aid, not just punitive bans. India needs to keep engaging with all sides in Sri Lanka, promoting reconciliation. And globally, pushing for more transparency in the arms trade, maybe through the UN Arms Trade Treaty.
Right. Prelims, human rights, arms trade, India-Sri Lanka relations, mains, GS Paper 2 IR, potentially ethics too.
Correct.
Okay, let's turn to some potentially good news. Amazon rainforest destruction in Brazil reportedly hitting a 17-year low.
Yes, quite a positive headline. The Amazon, as we know, is the world's largest tropical rainforest, vital for biodiversity and as a global carbon sink.
Absorbing more CO2 than it releases, deforestation has been a huge problem there.
Exactly, clearing forests for agriculture, logging, etc. So this reported low is significant. It's being attributed to stricter environmental law enforcement and policy changes under the current Brazilian administration.
That's encouraging. What specific policy changes seem to be working this time compared to past efforts?
It seems to be a combination: increased surveillance, cracking down on illegal land grabbing, renewed focus on reforestation, and perhaps more political will.
Prelims recap.
Yeah.
Key facts about the Amazon. Causes of deforestation.
Huge area, mostly in Brazil, holds maybe 10% of known species, crucial for rainfall patterns, massive carbon storage, main drivers, cattle ranching, soy cultivation, illegal logging, mining, infrastructure projects.
And Brazil's initiatives. IBAMA, the Amazon Fund.
Yes, IBAMA is their environmental agency. The Amazon Fund, supported by countries like Norway and Germany, finances conservation, and they use satellite monitoring extensively. Globally, this links to the Paris Agreement commitments and the annual COP climate talks.
Okay, main view. What's the recent context? Weren't deforestation rates very high just a few years ago?
They were, particularly between 2019 and 2022. The previous administration faced a lot of international criticism, so the current government has made a point of reversing some policies, stepping up enforcement.
Yeah, the impacts of reduced deforestation. Climate resilience. Biodiversity.
Absolutely. It helps maintain the Amazon's role in stabilizing the climate, protects countless species, safeguards indigenous communities. It can also reduce the risk of droughts and altered rainfall patterns across South America.
But challenges must remain. Economic pressures. Enforcement difficulties.
Definitely. The agricultural lobby is powerful. Enforcing laws across such a vast remote area is tough, and global demand for soy and beef continues to be a driver.
Is there an India angle here? Anything we can learn?
Perhaps. Brazil's use of satellite tech for monitoring is quite advanced, maybe lessons there for our own forest management. Also, as large tropical nations facing similar challenges, India and Brazil could align more strongly on climate platforms and sustainable development.
So the way forward globally. Strengthen conservation alliances, sustainable agriculture.
Yes, things like the Leaf Coalition for Forest Finance, promoting sustainable farming practices, tech cooperation, linking trade deals to sustainability standards, and critically, supporting community-led forest management, empowering local people.
Got it. Prelims, environment, climate change, Amazon, mains, GS Paper 3, environment, conservation, climate action.
Correct.
Okay, let's move to social justice and education now. South Korea's landmark bill to protect teachers from abuse. Sounds important.
It really is. Teacher abuse covers a range of mistreatment, verbal, emotional, even physical, often from students or parents. This bill provides legal safeguards laws to protect rights for educators. It's seen as a landmark bill because it marks a major policy shift.
What prompted this? Protests?
Yes.
Specific cases?
Yes, there were significant protests by teachers and reports of educators facing extreme stress, unfair complaints, and trauma, leading to demands for better protection. The new law aims to give them legal backing, better school support, and clear processes to handle false accusations.
The pressure teachers face, especially from parents. It's the
Oh.
global issue, isn't it? What elements of this South Korean bill might be relevant elsewhere, maybe India?
That's a great question. The emphasis on allowing teachers to report abuse without fear of reprisal, requiring schools to actively support teachers facing complaints, and potentially penalizing malicious accusations. These are aspects worth considering everywhere.
Prelims context. South Korea's education system is known for being intense, right?
Extremely competitive, high pressure on students, which often translates to high parental expectations and scrutiny of teachers.
How does this compare globally? Do other countries have similar protections?
Some do. Japan, Finland, parts of the UK have laws aimed at teacher protection. In India, our Right to Education Act focuses mainly on student rights. While crucial, there's growing talk about teacher harassment, especially in private schools, suggesting a potential gap in our framework.
For mains, what were the specific issues driving this in Korea? False complaints.
Yes, reports highlighted teachers suffering severely, even resigning or worse, due to aggressive or seemingly false complaints from parents in 2023-24. This sparked calls for reform.
It raises that ethical dilemma, balancing parental involvement with teacher autonomy and well-being.
Precisely. The implications could be significant, potentially improving teacher recruitment and retention, boosting morale, maybe even serving as a model law.
Sociopolitically, it's about restoring respect for the profession.
That seems to be part of the narrative, yes, reasserting the value and authority of teachers.
So for India or other countries facing similar issues, what are the potential first steps?
Assessing the scale of the problem teacher stress and harassment levels, setting up dedicated grievance cells for teachers, maybe amending education laws to explicitly protect teachers, and promoting mediation between parents and teachers rather than confrontation.
Okay. Prelims. Education reforms, global best practices, mains, GS Paper 2 governance, social justice, especially the education sector.
Exactly.
Right, shifting back to major international events, the U.S. House finally approved that big aid package for Ukraine.
Yes, a very significant development after months of debate. We're talking about foreign aid, one country assisting another. In this case, a lot of it is military assistance, weapons, training, logistics.
All within this major geopolitical conflict, which some call a proxy war.
Correct. The $60 billion package includes military hardware, economic support, funds for reconstruction. Ukraine has obviously welcomed it as vital.
Prelims reminder. The conflict's background. Started 2014, full invasion Feb 2022, NATO support versus Russian aims.
Yes, the U.S. has been the primary aid provider, weapons like HIMARS, Patriots, drones, but also humanitarian and economic support.
And India's stance has been
Consistently calling for dialogue and diplomacy, non-aligned, abstaining on key UN votes related to the conflict. The war's impact on the global order has been huge, deepening divides, energy security concerns, supply chain issues, push for strategic autonomy.
Okay, mains angle. What are the key considerations around this continued U.S. aid? Humanitarian, economic, ethical?
The humanitarian cost of the war is immense, millions displaced. Economically, it's fueled global inflation, especially energy and food. Strategically, the aid is seen by many as crucial for Ukraine's ability to resist and eventually rebuild.
But there are downsides or complications, prolonging the conflict. Accountability.
Those are the main concerns raised. Could it prolong the fighting? Are there sufficient checks to prevent aid diversion or misuse, especially in a war zone? Globally, there's the question of focus. Does Ukraine aid detract from other crises? And the strain on the U.S. budget itself.
Ethically, it touches on sovereignty versus intervention debates.
Yes, and the responsibility of the international community in such conflicts.
So, looking ahead, what's the way forward? Push for ceasefire.
That's the immediate hope, UN or other mediators pushing for a ceasefire. Ensuring aid transparency is critical. Planning for post-conflict reconstruction needs to happen alongside military aid. Ultimately, it needs a balance between immediate security support and long-term peace-building efforts.
Okay, prelims. International relations, global conflicts, mains. GS Paper 2, international affairs, ethics of intervention, perhaps.
Right.
Now, to the Middle East. Iran seizing a vessel in the Strait of Hormuz, claiming links to Israel. This sounds like raising tensions again.
It certainly does. The Strait of Hormuz, that narrow waterway between the Persian Gulf and the Arabian Sea, is a critical choke point.
About 20% of world oil passes through.
Roughly, yes. So maritime security there is vital. A vessel seizure is a forcible takeover by a state's forces. And Iran linking it to Israel puts it squarely in the context of their ongoing proxy conflict, indirect confrontation.
Prelims basics, straight location between Iran and Oman, history of U.S.-Iran tensions there.
Exactly. And the long-standing Iran-Israel rivalry playing out across the region through proxies like Hezbollah, Hamas, and actions in places like Syria, Lebanon, plus cyber attacks.
What about maritime law? UNCLS.
UNCLS, the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, guarantees freedom of navigation through international straits. Seizures like this raise serious legal questions. For India, this is crucial. Our oil imports from the Gulf transit Hormuz. Any disruption impacts energy security. Plus, the large Indian diaspora in the Gulf region makes stability a key concern.
Okay, Maine's view. What are the broader geopolitical implications, rising tensions?
Yes, it points to rising maritime tensions globally, not just Hormuz, but the Red Sea, Gulf of Oman, too. Iran sometimes uses seizures as leverage. It increases market instability, threatens navigation principles.
Risk of escalation, retaliation.
That's always the danger. Retaliation from Israel or the U.S. could broaden the conflict. Legally, it challenges UNCLS enforcement and could bring international condemnation or more sanctions on Iran.
And India's concerns are energy security and diaspora safety.
Primarily, yes. It demands careful diplomacy and preparedness from our side.
So, the way forward, de-escalation, security coalitions.
Diplomatic efforts via the UN are needed. Strengthening security coalitions like the Combined Maritime Forces, CMF, can help deter actions. Promoting dialogue between Iran and its Gulf neighbors is also important for regional stability. India can work through IOR groupings to advocate for safe navigation.
Okay. Prelims, geography Hormuz, maritime security West Asia dynamics, mains, GS Paper 2 IR, GS Paper 3 energy security and strategic interests. And finally, Russia agreeing to supply natural gas to Uzbekistan via Kazakhstan, an energy deal with regional implications.
Yes, this is about natural gas supply agreements, formal contracts for energy exports, often involving pipelines, leading to pipeline diplomacy, using energy infrastructure for geopolitical influence. Energy security, reliable, affordable supply is key here for Uzbekistan.
And Central Asia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan is strategically important.
Very much so. This deal strengthens regional energy cooperation. It clearly shows Russia's pivot to Asia amidst Western sanctions. And for Uzbekistan, it helps tackle their energy shortages, especially in winter.
Prelims points. Key players: Russia, Gazprom, Kazakhstan Transit, Uzbekistan Consumer, pipelines in the region.
Important ones include the old Central Asia Center system linking to Russia, newer ones like Turkstream to Europe-Turkey, Power of Siberia to China. Geopolitically, Russia is actively engaging Central South Asia post-Ukraine. Central Asian states are being courted by Russia, China, Turkey for energy ties.
And India's interest, SCO-INSTC.
Yes, as an SCO member, energy security in Central Asia is on our agenda, and initiatives like the INSTC aim to improve connectivity to the region.
Maine's view, strategic implications, increased Russian influence.
Definitely enhances Russian influence in Central Asian energy, strengthens Kazakhstan's role as a transit state, furthers regional energy integration.
Challenges, pipeline vulnerability, overdependence.
Pipelines are always vulnerable, politically and technically. Uzbekistan risks becoming too reliant on Russian gas, potentially limiting its foreign policy options. Infrastructure needs ongoing investment.
And India's diplomatic angle, opportunities for cooperation.
It highlights Russia's influence, which we need to factor in, but it could also open doors for Indian energy cooperation in Central Asia, maybe via the SCO Energy Club or bilateral deals.
So the way forward for Central Asian nations, diversification, renewables.
Diversifying energy partners is wise. Investing in regional grid connectivity enhances security. Boosting renewables reduces fossil fuel dependence.
And for India, explore joint ventures.
Yes, exploring JVs in gas processing, pipelines, leveraging our regional ties through SCO and bilaterally.
Got it. Prelims, Central Asian geography, energy trade, pipelines, mains, GS Paper 2 IR, GS Paper 3 energy security.
That covers it.
Well, that brings us to the end of today's deep dive. We've certainly covered a lot of ground, from diplomatic tensions close to home, naval exercises, digital regulations, defense shifts, human rights concerns, environmental news, social reforms, and major geopolitical conflicts and energy deals.
Indeed. The goal, as always, was to give you that comprehensive analysis, break down the basics, and clearly link it all back to your UPSC preparation needs.
Absolutely. Remember to subscribe for our daily updates, and please do leave a comment, share your thoughts on these complex issues. You can also download the audio or the transcript for revision. Until next time, Jai Hein.